let's dive a little into the effect of drugs on our nervous system, and in particular, how addiction can act. So we're going to deal with some of my art here. I'm not a fabulous artist, so we're just going to have to roll with this. But I have here a sending and receiving neuron, a presynaptic neuron and a postsynaptic neuron. The postsynaptic neuron is receiving information from the sending neuron to change its firing rate. A postsynaptic neuron is going to have a base firing rate. This is just sort of the all's clear, nothing interesting is happening. This is the nothing interesting is going on rate at which the neuron fires. If we were to place a drug that was, for example, an agonist to an excitatory neurotransmitter into the gap, regardless of what the sending neuron is doing, regardless of what the presynaptic neuron is doing, the presence of that drug increases an excitatory neurotransmitter, causing the postsynaptic neuron now to fire very quickly. Neurons, however, are not designed to fire for long periods of time. In fact, if they fire too much, they can actually die. So the neuron is going to want to adapt itself, to adjust itself back to its base fire rate. It's going to decide, you know what, I'm a little too wired to this neuron. I got to decrease how sensitive I am to this neuron because it's sending too much of the fire signal, right? This is because of the drug, but the postsynaptic neuron doesn't know it. So how do you decrease the connectiveness? Well, the easiest way to do that is to prune the dendrites. The dendrites of the postsynaptic neuron can actually grow or shrink, be eliminated, or be added to based on its desire to be connected to a given neuron. And when it's too sensitive, it can decrease the number of dendritic connections. Thus, in the presence of the drug, it can return back to its base firing rate. The neuron is now comfortable, but the problem is when the drug is present, it doesn't increase the firing rate of that neuron. So now when we take this drug, we're no longer receiving the same effect that it once had. So what do we need to do to get that effect again? Well, we have to add more drug. More drug has to be present. This then causes the neuron to start firing rapidly again. You get the effect, but again, the neuron is going to want to adapt itself and lower its sensitivity. It can do this not just through changes in the dendrites, right, but it can do it through a variety of mechanisms within that synaptic gap. This change in sensitivity to the drug over time is what we call tolerance, right? Tolerance is when it takes more of the substance to get the same effect. You can get that by the neuron decreasing its dendrites. It can do it by decreasing neurotransmitter production. It can decrease receptor sites. It can increase reuptake. It can decrease the genetic expression of the neurotransmitter. It can do many, many things at both a macro and microbiological level to decrease the sensitivity between the two neurons. The problem is, right, what happens when the drug is no longer present in the system? Right. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at a biological adaptation to the presence of a drug. Right? This is where our brain changes its physical and chemical systems in the presence of a drug. And this happens anytime a drug affects our neurons. Right? This is what we call tolerance. Right? What we're looking at here is a dose-response curve. Along the x-axis is the dose, along the y-axis is the effect. What you find upon your first exposure is it takes only a little bit of the drug to have a dramatic effect. However, after repeated exposures, that response curve shifts to the right. That's tolerance. It takes more drug to have the same effect. In fact, it can take a substantially larger amount of the drug to maintain the effect. Then the nervous system adapts to that, we need even more. And the nervous system adapts to that, and we need even more. Right? And this tolerance curve can continue to shift, requiring more and more drug consumption. But like I just asked a minute ago, what happens when the drug is no longer present? The nervous system has adapted to the presence of the drug, and now when the drug is no longer present, you get withdrawals. Withdrawals occur when the nervous system has adapted to the presence of the drug, you have a developed tolerance, and when the drug is not in your system, the nervous system is now no longer responding optimally. Withdrawal symptoms can be horrific. There can be sweating, there can be nausea, there can be emotional damage, there can be intense pain, there can be massive psychological harm, right? The withdrawal symptoms of these drugs can be quite severe. And this occurs because of tolerance, right? There's a direct link between tolerance and withdrawal. As tolerance develops, that represents the physical, biological, and chemical adaptation of the body to the presence of the drug. That means when the drug is absent, the body is no longer adapted to that environment, and that means if we want to return to normal, if we just want to feel like normal, if we just want to feel how we did before we ever started taking the drug, we have to take the drug. And when we don't, we get withdrawal symptoms. And that need to take the drug ultimately represents addiction and dependence. In particular, we're talking about physical dependence. Physical dependence is when the withdrawal symptoms is driving our need to take and consume that drug. We can also have psychological dependence. Psychological dependence is where we don't necessarily have strong withdrawal symptoms driving our need to take the drug, but instead we have a belief that in order to do certain things, we require the drug. When I've had a stressful day at work, the only way I can relax is with alcohol. If I have to go to a party, I have to drink or smoke marijuana, or else I won't be sociable, I won't have a good time, right? Or I won't be able to sleep if I don't get high. These kind of psychological dependencies can play just as strong a role in addiction as the physical dependency. So when we combine tolerance, withdrawal, and dependency, that's ultimately the cycle of addiction. So there's a direct link between tolerance, the biological adaptation to the presence of the drug, the withdrawal, the effect of the drug no longer being present, and the dependency, the need to take that drug to return to normalcy, that creates the cycle of addiction.